most of my garden here is actually quite shady, so that's where this palette of green dense jungle planting really looks at home. But as things get sunnier further up the garden, closer to my fire pit area that I'm working on currently, that's when an entirely new palette of plants comes to play. More Mediterranean, more strikingly exotic. And today I'm talking about a group of plants, aloes, that can definitely add a vibrant, unusual and really impressive bit of structure to your sunny garden. Don't worry, I'm not getting completely carried away. I know I don't live in South Africa, California, the places where these kind of plants really thrive. So that's why today I'm looking at 4 aloes that are suitable, or hopefully suitable, for growing right here in the UK. Great for sunny gardens, great for well-drained soil, and great for container culture too. So the first 2 I'm looking at, technically not aloes anymore, but more on that later, but they're certainly worth growing. Extremely hardy, very tough, and definitely an unusual addition to your garden. The third one, maybe not quite as hardy, but certainly more beautiful. An interesting pattern plant that's definitely guaranteed to get your friends talking. And fourth, I'm saving the best till last. I'm looking at a hybrid aloe that's got the potential to be a full-on tree. Is it hardy in the UK? I certainly don't know. Is it worth a go? Potentially, but I know it's one that you'll want to try growing yourselves. So let's get cracking. We'll start off then with the easiest aloe to grow. This is definitely the hardiest, the toughest, and a really useful plant for the garden. It's this plant here that I know as Aloe striatula, although I believe now it's known as Aloiampelos striatula, something like that anyway. And this is a great plant I enjoy growing here to really add a sort of unusual alien-like kind of structure to any kind of dry border. It's a plant that primarily thrives in full sun, but if you've got a bit of shade, it seems to grow equally well. It can get a little bit elongated, maybe a little bit stretched out, but it's a plant that I love just for that weird texture that it kind of adds to the garden. As you can see, this one's flowering, and the flower itself looks very much like a red hot poker. It's got that same kind of vibe to it, but it's a bright yellow colour as it opens up. And at the minute, you can see this plant, it's a single stem, but this is a plant you can probably see close at the base there. It does form these little shoots coming off the trunk, and over time, well, when I say over time, they do grow pretty quickly, this will form a nice clump. So it's not just a single stem, a bit leggy and wiry. This is a plant that will form a really big clump of these fleshy leaves, these amazing yellow flowers in summer. So it's definitely a useful plant if you've got a Mediterranean or dry border and you want to add something that's really got a touch of the exotic. This is definitely the easiest aloe to grow. So you need to leave space for it, but it's certainly worth it. And when it comes to propagating these and spreading it around your garden, it couldn't be easier. Late spring, early summertime, you can literally chop these stems off, remove some of the lower leaves, put it in dry compost, don't get it too wet, don't let it completely dry out, and then it roots away just fine. So it's really easy to grow from cuttings, very easy to grow, and in the winter I do absolutely nothing for it. A hard frost, it sees it take on a little bit of a glaze look, it looks a little bit limp, but as soon as it warms up, it bounces back. These are incredibly tough plants, far tougher than you might expect. Next up then, we've got another really hardy aloe, but this one, I've got to admit, I did actually lose a specimen of at our old house, but I think the lesson there is, this one is really tough and hardy as long as you've got a well-drained soil. So I certainly prioritise a sunny spot, a gritty soil, definitely one for those raised beds or even containers. Certainly if you live in colder areas, container culture is great for these aloes, and simply move them to a cold greenhouse or a house windowsill over the winter. This one, I used to know this as either a lace aloe or Aloe aristata, but I now believe this one's known as Aristaloe aristata. So it's got twice the arista, but the same great plant. And as you can see, this one is also flowering. So it's definitely a more diminutive plant. This one, as you can see, produces these small rosettes and they gradually spread around. So it'll form a nice clump. So personally, I think this is a great plant, either for pots, to have something interesting, to carry that sort of houseplant succulent vibe into your garden, or even in rockeries like I'm growing here. And when I say rockery, I think the idea of a rockery as being something dominated by dwarf conifers and a few small flowering alpines, that's kind of changed. And my idea of a rockery is all about these unusual plants, striking succulents and bright colours. And this one definitely fits in. It's a great looking plant. You've got these unusual blooms that come out in late spring or early summer. And personally, I think it's one of those plants it's worth trying out. Find somewhere in your garden that's full sun, an area where the soil's really well drained. Maybe raise it up a bit, have a few rocks, and have some of these planted in amongst them. It should, in theory, be a very low maintenance, very easy plant to grow, and very tough too. So definitely one to try. So whether you're looking for an interesting filler plant to plant around the base of palms, something to go in a pot, or a budget option to really fill a dry or arid style border, those two Aloes, they're readily available, very easy to grow, and very tough and hardy too. The next one is a little bit trickier, but there's one tip, one unusual planting tip that you can use that should give you a great chance of getting it through our winters. What's it that's caught Max's eye? It's not this Aloe, it's actually Remy, who's sat there being naughty, climbing over the pots as usual. I don't know. This plant though that I'm trying to draw your attention to, this is Aloe polyphylla, the spiral Aloe. And this is one that I've grown from seed myself. I grew it in 2016, that's when it germinated, and they actually grow pretty rapidly. This one, as you can see, it's not in perfect condition, it's got some winter damage, and I suspect it's probably not ideal to have it in a pot outside unprotected in winter. I think there's probably too much moisture for it, but it's a beautiful looking plant, and this is one that I'm actually going to plant out next to my fire pit. This rosette, you can probably see, is just over a foot across, actually probably about 1.5 feet, and it's actually well on its way to creating that spiral kind of pattern. And when you see a pristine example a little bit bigger than this, that spiral, it really is breathtaking. St Michael's Mount down in Cornwall has some cracking examples. And speaking to a friend who's actually grown one of these, a large one than this, in East Yorkshire, he has them planted in the same fashion. That is on a 45-degree slope. That's the way to plant these. They need good drainage and they want as much moisture as possible out of this centre, because these fleshy leaves, they can actually rot quite easily. But if you can give it that, or some kind of overhead cover, this can easily get to maybe 2 foot across. Again, it has really incredible flowers, but it's such a striking looking plant. So if you want something unusual, definitely unusual, a succulent that can be pride of place in a rockery or a large container, then Aloe polyphylla is definitely a great one. For me, one of the things that makes Aloe polyphylla such a great option for the UK is that they actually come from areas of South Africa, mountainous areas that experience lots of moisture, high rainfall, and even snow in winter. So this Aloe, I think you've got to change your perception of how these plants grow. Yes, it needs great drainage, but this, I see it as more of an alpine plant. So I'm going to plant it on a nice gritty base, really good drainage, but then in summer, I'm going to give it extra water too. And I think that's really going to help it size up. What I'll probably do is give it an overhead cover, maybe some polycarbonate on top of 4 posts, just to keep the worst of the rain off in winter. But this is a plant with the potential to size up quickly, and like I said, those flowers, they're really striking too. As you can see, the gingers, these are Hedychium gardnerianum, they're sizing up really well now. That heat, the consistent moisture, that's all they need to really get going, and it won't be long before they've got those beautifully fragrant flowers. But anyway, onto Aloe number 4, and this one really is interesting. First though, a quick summary of the plants in terms of hardiness, how easy they are to get hold of, and how easy they are to grow. So the one that ticks all the boxes is definitely Aloe striatula. It's a great Aloe to go for if you've just started an exotic style garden and maybe you've got a dry Mediterranean or sort of spiky succulent area. If you like growing yucca rostrata, maybe some agaves, then Aloe striatula, it'll go along with them just fine. Then maybe with a little bit more effort, Aloe aristata. If you can improve the drainage, again, it's a great plant for those drier areas, a really interesting little filler plant, and those blooms definitely take it to the next level. You can really capture a bit of that sort of Californian vibe in your garden. And then thirdly, Aloe polyphylla. I think it might take a bit more effort, not to keep it alive necessarily in more sheltered areas, but to keep it looking good. So potentially an overhead cover, or maybe keeping it in a pot and actually bringing it under cover in winter. Both those options can certainly keep it looking good. So those are 3 Aloes that are mostly hardy in most of the UK, or at least with a bit of care. Now the last one, this is an Aloe that's definitely got a pedigree. It's a hybrid Aloe, and this one's got the potential to be a full-on tree. I don't know how I'm going to manage that in the future here, but I'll show you what my plant looks like now. Remy, what are you doing up there? Such a naughty boy. So, the Aloe in question, it's this one here. This is Aloe Hercules, and it's a truly monstrous Aloe. What I will say is, after you finish watching this video, definitely Google this. You can see what an absolutely monstrous beast this can turn into. This is an aloe that can actually grow 3 feet of trunk a year, and that trunk literally gets to the size of a tree. It really is such an alien-like plant. Personally, my plan for this aloe is to actually keep potting it up until I get a really impressive potted specimen plant, something that will probably eventually touch the top of the greenhouse. I just think they're such a crazy looking plant. If you want to have a kind of botanic garden plant, a curiosity that no one else will have in their gardens, this is the one. Unfortunately, they're quite tricky to get hold of, but let me tell you why this is such an exciting aloe to grow. My competitive strongman days then, they might be behind me, but Aloe Hercules is definitely a plant with a very strong future. And the reason for that is, it's because it's a hybrid aloe. It's basically the result of crossing 2 different tree aloes, and the actual offspring, it combines the best attributes of both. So you've got an aloe that can really grow gigantic, but it also has the hardiness of its parent as well. And the end result actually has hybrid vigour, which means it grows even faster than either of its parents. So you've really got a very exciting mix. And for people over in the US who maybe have hot summers but then colder winters, areas that occasionally see freezes or at least frosts in winter, this is a way of growing those gigantic California type aloes, but still having it not turn to complete mush after a colder winter. So really, I think if you live in a warmer country that does have cold winters, Aloe Hercules is a very exciting prospect. For us here in places like the UK, that's where things might get a little bit more experimental. In theory, it can probably take down to negative something, we'll say between 0 and -10 in degrees Celsius. But will that mean it can survive here? I honestly don't know. The UK climate, it's very different. You can't really compare it to USDA zones. We have a lot more humidity in winter, a lot more rainfall, and that's what these kind of plants really struggle with. But is it an option maybe in central London? Is it a plant that could grow truly massive down in Cornwall? Is it a plant that could actually reach its full-on adult proportions over in the Isles of Scilly? Who knows? All I know is it's a very exciting plant, a plant with the potential to one day be the most stunning plant here in the garden. So thanks for watching today's video. I hope it's given you some interesting ideas. Not every succulent has to be on your windowsill inside. There's some really exciting options for your garden too. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.